So hello everybody, welcome. Today we're here to talk about the Library of Congress's crowdsourced transcription program by the people. I'm Carlin Osborne, and I'll be presenting with my colleagues Abby Shelton and Lauren Algie today. We're all by the people community managers. All right, and so we are so excited to speak with everyone today. We have plenty of time, so please drop your questions in the Q&A feature. So down at the bottom of the screen, if your Q&A is not displaying, hit those three dots. You should be able to see the Q&A there. And we're going to have plenty of time at the end of our presentation to answer all of your questions. So today we're going to go over the basics of what By the People exactly is, how it works, what our goals are as a program. And then Abby's going to talk about our special thematic projects that we've published for America's 250th birthday this year. And she's also going to talk about our volunteers' incredible impact on the library and our nation's collections. And Lauren's going to talk about hosting transcription events that maybe you want to be involved with. And if everything goes to plan, we're going to do a live demo. All right, so Lauren, let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to get my camera off because it's too distracting. All right, so just a little bit about the library and what we offer. The Library of Congress is the de facto national library of the United States. We're part of the legislative branch of the federal government and are the largest library in the world. And we're open to the public, so please come visit us here in Washington, D.C. to do research, see our wonderful exhibits, and visit our beautiful historic buildings right on Capitol Hill. We're home to over 178 million items, if you can believe it, and those include over 900 archival collections of members of Congress, the papers of 23 presidents ranging from George Washington to Calvin Coolidge, and we boast the personal papers of many famous Americans, including Susan B. Anthony, Frederick Douglass, and Walt Whitman, just to name a few. And we are adding every day over 10,000 new items, and those aren't just books. Those include music, film, interviews, photos, newspapers, maps, and numerous manuscript collections. All right, Lauren, next slide, please. All right, so let's start with the basics. What is our program By the People? By the People is a virtual volunteering program entirely online at crowd.loc.gov. Anyone can visit our website and contribute to library collections by transcribing handwritten and typed historical documents. Volunteers also review the transcriptions of other volunteers' work before they're finished. By the People has two equally important goals: collection enhancement and user engagement. Transcriptions improve discovery within our collections by enabling keyword search at the page level. Transcriptions also aid accessibility. They make it easier for everyone to read handwritten, blurry, or dense documents. They also create text that can be used by screen readers and other accessibility tools. Transcriptions additionally turn the document's text into data that can power different types of computational research. But we're focused more on on things other than collection enhancement, because we want to be able to help our volunteers learn and connect with collections and our history. Transcription requires volunteers to read closely to decipher primary sources and forge personal connections to people and moments from history while contributing to scholarship of the future. Volunteers can build skills to help them understand what these documents meant at the time they were created and what they could mean to us now. Lauren, can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So how does transcription work? Here's an example transcription in our interface showing a page from Theodore Roosevelt's correspondence. Volunteers get to choose what they work on. Just find a collection and a page that piques your interest. Instructions are incredibly simple and embedded right into the transcription interface, but at its core, we're asking you to type what you see. So there are no assignments. You explore until you find a page that looks interesting to you. You get to work at your own pace, and you can move on at any time. Next slide, please. So anyone can transcribe without an account, but registered users can also review and tag pages and track their contributions on a profile page. Review is a really important part of this process. Reviewers help get pages across the finish line so completed text can be published back on the library's website, loc.gov. We like to think of this review process as a safety net that gives you a chance to try it out, make mistakes, learn from them, all while knowing that someone else is going to review your work before it's done. So on this slide, you can see a page that is completed. Almost. It needs another reviewer. So if you're signed in, you can hit that accept button if everything looks good to you. Lauren, next slide, please. So we have resources available on every page to help you get started and to stay on track. Each page available for transcription offers a how-to guide. So on the far right, you select the blue how-to button, and this menu will slide out. And there's also the how-to section of our entire website, which you can access at the very top of our navigation bar, which is also opened up. So under how-to, you can see get started, transcribe, review, and tag. All right, Laura, next slide, please. So after transcriptions are complete, we work closely with our colleagues across the library to return the transcribed text from volunteers back to our main digital collections website, where they're published alongside the original images on loc.gov. And we also publish these transcriptions as full text data sets. So this image on the left is one of our favorite examples of a completed volunteer transcription. It's Rosa Parks' recipe for feather light pancakes. Now that it has a transcription, when you search for peanut butter in loc.gov, you'll get to this item immediately. And peanut butter was her secret ingredient. So while this is a fun example, you can also imagine what this does for the names and places found throughout her papers. All right, Abby, over to you.
Thanks, Carlin. So what kinds of things do our volunteers transcribe? We try to offer materials of varying difficulty as well as different formats, different eras. We try to highlight different types of lives and stories, which are available in the Library of Congress's collections. In general, our volunteers transcribe material that can't easily be transcribed, or the text can't be automatically read by computer systems. So in general, that tends to be handwritten manuscript items, but that can also be printed materials that are in unique formats like sheet music, things that are printed on carbon copy paper or other formats that don't do well when it comes to computer vision. We group material together in what we call campaigns. So you may have heard that term already, and you may hear it more as we move along. These can be thematic, so drawing from multiple collections around a certain theme, or they can correspond to the collection of one singular person or one organization. So on the slide here, you can see some of our active campaigns. They include things like presidential papers from Theodore Roosevelt and James Garfield, the papers of notable Americans like Clara Barton, Walt Whitman, Frederick Law Olmsted. They also include things like sheet music from the early years of musical theater, and also an very interesting collection of musical cue sheets for silent films. These were the sheets that were given to musicians accompanying these films that told them when they were to play certain songs. And we add new material about every other month. I would highly recommend subscribing to our newsletter, and we'll put a link to that page in the chat to keep up on what collections are currently available and what collections will be coming soon. Next slide. But I'm very excited today to highlight some of the materials we've been rolling out since last fall. We've been working with WETA and PBS as a community engagement partner for Ken Burns' most recent documentary, The American Revolution, and also in celebration of America's 250th birthday this year. So these collections are primary sources that give even more context to the history of the founding of our country, and they're grouped together under a topic heading of the American Revolution and context. Next slide. Okay, so the first campaign in this series that I want to highlight is called Women of the Early Republic. This is a manuscript or handwritten, mostly handwritten documents campaign. It brings together things like letters, diaries, commonplace books, and the papers of four women, mostly from the upper echelons of colonial American society. And these women recorded their firsthand experiences of the new political landscape caused by the American Revolution and the foundation of the new American Republic. You'll find references in their papers to some of the most important figures of the era that they were connected to. These women witnessed many significant historical moments that they reflect on in their papers, but also you'll find lots of interesting information about everyday life in the colonies and the new nation. We can go to the next slide. We've also launched a series of campaigns from our rare book division. So these are largely printed materials, but again, printed in formats that don't lend themselves well to computer processing. We've launched a selection of early American books, cookbooks, and then early American copyright ledgers. These are a cross-section of materials published, printed, written, or distributed in the early American colonies and New Republic. They include things like pamphlets, broadsides, also printed books, and their topics are as varied as focusing on religion, politics, economics, culture, music, education, and everything in between. Our cookbooks have proved to be a very popular part of this series. They are mostly written by British authors, though many were published in the United States. But they were cookbooks that were widely available at the time for those who had the means to purchase them. And they really are a unique window into 18th century life, including the ingredients available to cooks through local production and international trade. You'll learn a lot in there about 18th century tastes and preferences, the kinds of foods that people liked. And these cookbooks are more than just recipes for food. They also include medical remedies and also housekeeping techniques. Cookbooks and cooking, these were traditionally the domain of women in the 18th century, and many of these cookbooks were written by women, including what is considered the first cookbook written and published in America by Amelia Simmons, who's a fascinating character. And then finally, from the rare book division, we have the early American copyright ledgers. And these are a significant source of information about the United States during its early years. These are ledgers that record copyright registrations for things like sheet music, prints, dramatic compositions, and books covering all manner of topics. Not all of the works registered or recorded in these ledgers have survived. So it's an interesting way to learn about what was being written and what was being published, even though the works themselves may not have survived to this day. Next slide, please. So those campaigns have already been launched. They're live and available on our site for you to transcribe. Coming later this month will be our Early American Sheet Music campaign. This campaign includes sheet music and books about music published in America before, during, and soon following the American Revolution. This collection includes not only European music that was popular at the time, but also early American music composed and performed by Americans, including figures like Francis Johnson, who was the first African American composer to publish music in the US. We can go to the next slide, please. And then the final campaign in this series will launch later this spring, and that is the Atlantic Neptune atlases. So these atlases were hugely important to British ability to navigate around the Americas, and they include a lot of text and captions that is what we will be asking volunteers to transcribe. This is an exciting campaign for us because this is the first time our volunteers will get to transcribe materials from the library's Geography and Maps division. And they're really just beautiful artifacts to look at in addition to all of the important historical material that they contain. We can go to the next slide. So now let's talk a little bit about the impact of our volunteers and their transcriptions before we transition to Lauren, who will show us how you can get involved. So since our program launched in 2018, our volunteers have completed a really impressive amount of pages. They've transcribed over 1.2 million pages across 53 campaigns. We've returned over 770,000 transcriptions back to the library's main website, where they enhance keyword search, as Carlin mentioned. We have over 53,000 registered volunteers and countless numbers of anonymous volunteers who also contribute to the program as well. We can go to the next slide. So those are some very impressive numbers of what our volunteers have accomplished, but what do these completed transcriptions actually do for search and discovery of the materials at the Library of Congress? So we've done some research on the digital collections on the library's website that have by the people transcriptions, and we found some really interesting things. First, we see in all of the collections that we've examined that once we add transcriptions back to those collections, web traffic to those collections goes dramatically up, which is what you might expect, but it's great to be able to demonstrate with the web analytics. For instance, we looked at the Clara Barton collection. She was a Civil War nurse and founder of the American Red Cross. And we compared a portion of the collection that was transcribed to a portion of the collection that didn't yet have transcriptions. And we found that the transcriptions doubled the web traffic to that portion of the collection, which is a great finding. And we've also found, in looking at the search terms that people use on the library's website, that about 30 to 40% of the search terms that people use to get to the library's collections are only found in the transcriptions, which means that before transcriptions were available to those collections, people using those terms wouldn't be able to find what they were able to find after transcriptions were available. So they really, looking at the web analytics helps us see how transcriptions unlock portions of these collections that may be more difficult to find without the transcriptions. We can go to the next slide, please. We've also been gathering stories of what people have done with our collections. And it looks like some of the images, Lauren, do you want to, there we go. Okay. We've also been collecting stories of what researchers have been doing with these transcriptions. We know, for instance, that people have used them to enhance research for edited editions and scholarly volumes. You can see one of the books there on the left of a collection of materials that was transcribed and then published by a scholar of the Civil War. We also know that people have used them for all kinds of digital projects as well. We know of groups of college students that have used transcriptions to map out Rosa Parks' contacts from her address books, people who have used them in all kinds of language analysis projects, that kind of thing. We can go to the next slide, please. We also know about ways that internal Library of Congress colleagues have been able to use the transcriptions to more easily connect Library of Congress collections to researchers and patrons. And one particular Library of Congress and community partnership that we want to highlight is the local project. This project has really been facilitated and enabled in some ways by the People transcriptions. This project is working with communities and public libraries in two places to begin with, in Eastern Oklahoma and Cleveland, Ohio, to pilot innovative ways to connect our national library's treasures with local places around the country. And for the project based in Eastern Oklahoma, designers have built a digital experience that invites people to recount their memories of the three rivers that play a vital role in that part of the state. The memories of community members are then paired with collection items from the library, which would really not be possible without By the People transcriptions. And you can see an example, an image of what this looks like. This will be launching in Eastern Oklahoma, the Eastern Oklahoma Library System, actually in May. So if you're from that part of the country, you can go and visit it. But this is a great example of how these transcriptions make visible the connections between what our nation's library holds and the history and experience of the places that we all call home, wherever we may be from. We can go to the next slide. We've also asked our volunteers in surveys in the past to reflect on what they've gained by participating on a personal level. And this is a wonderful quote that we received from one of our volunteers about what it's like to volunteer with By the People. This person says, most meaningful is the feeling that I'm contributing something much bigger than myself. It makes By the People seem more real to me. It connects me to other Americans looking for shared meaning in our history. And it shows me that this country is a work in progress, which is a good thing. So we hope that you'll join us in transcribing our national collections and become part of this collaboration. And so to talk more about how you can join us, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren.
So I'm going to get to our demo in just a little bit, but first I wanted to touch on a few more things. Hopefully you're now really excited about volunteering and the impact you'll be able to make, but maybe you're so excited that you're also thinking about going on beyond just transcribing as a volunteer and want to see how you could connect this further to your community or other organizations. We hear frequently from libraries, schools, and even community groups like book clubs that host transcription events. The most popular program is a Transcribe-a-thon. So this is a set day or a set time when people come together to transcribe and learn in community. So one example of this is an event organized each year called Douglas Day that we've participated with a few times. Each year, hundreds of libraries and schools around the US and even the world host their own Douglas Day celebrations in computer labs, classrooms, and campus lounges where they get together to transcribe history. So you can see some pictures there from past Douglas Day events. Transcribe-a-thons are a great way to introduce people to this new activity, to support them as they try it out and learn, and to share cool findings and connection with each other. It's really building on the model of other, library and school programs, sort of like a knitting circle, right? People come in who are experienced, people who are newbies, and they do an activity together to help sort of support and build community. So Douglas Day is a great model, but you don't need a holiday in order to host a Transcribe-a-thon. And they can be either in person or virtual. So if you try out By the People and you really want to share it, I want to point out our Transcribe-a-thon resources that are available using the resources link at the top of any of our pages. We've developed a how-to guide there that has sort of best practice for planning a Transcribe-a-thon. We have a template presentation, a PowerPoint that you can use to kick off and guide your event. And we also have printable quick tips, handouts that have some of our most important instructions as a PDF that you could give out to your participants. Another thing I want to point out is our activity tracking tools. So we hear from a lot of folks who use By the People and volunteering for community service hours or service learning hours for students. So to support that kind of volunteering, we've developed activity tracking tools. These primarily were developed for many service learners that we heard from starting in 2020. People were looking for safe online volunteering activities, but they can also be useful for anyone who wants to track their progress, track what they've worked on, or track what they've done as a group, for example, as part of a Transcribe-a-thon. So all of these tools are available on your profile page if you're a registered user. So that's one reason to register in addition to having access to being a reviewer. So if you go to your profile page, you'll be able to track your contributions. You can see an example of that on the screen showing how many things you've worked on. You can also download an official letter that documents your service. It's on Library of Congress letterhead. It has my signature on it, and it confirms, yes, you've participated and how much you've done. So that can be really important if you need to submit service to someone. We also have a template for doing a time log. We are not able to track volunteering time within the site ourselves for a variety of reasons, but we do want to provide a template that lets you track your own time if that's something that's important to you. So that log is also available on the profile page, and it's also available on the resources page if you're not registered. So with that in mind, I'm going to switch the demo. So bear with me as I transition from sharing PowerPoint to going live to my browser. So it's always a bit of a risk to do a live demonstration, but I think we'll be good. So if you haven't already, I encourage you after this presentation to go to crowd.loc.gov. That's our website. And this is the homepage that you'll find. And so I'm just going to take us through navigation of the site and some of the key things that we've talked about in this presentation that'll help you get started. So right away on the homepage, you'll see a carousel that is highlighting some of our recent campaigns and activities that we're trying to promote most to volunteers. You'll also see these surprise me links. You can click these, that'll take you straight into a page that needs transcription or that needs review. So that can be a really easy way to get started if you don't feel like, browsing through a lot of pages to get going. However, I also encourage you to take a look at the campaigns list under all campaigns. This will show you everything that we have available at a given time. We usually have between 10 to 15 campaigns available at any time, and you can see just by browsing what activities are available to do. So the dark blue are pages that have been completed. Light blue are things that need review, and this sort of gray area are things that are either not started or in progress. So that sort of tells you, Claire Barton, for example, there's nothing left to just get started transcribing, but there's review that's needed there. So you can browse all of those. If you want to see all of our campaigns, you can expand to see them all. And we also have topics here that bring together some of the projects within these campaigns that are related. For example, things related to the Civil War, some of our presidential papers. And this American Revolution in Context topic is where you'll find all those American Revolution campaigns that Abby was talking about in one place. They're also included individually in that campaigns list, but this topic is a nice way to see them together. So if we go into a campaign, you can find out more information about the collection, some helpful links to learn more about the collection if you want to dig deeper. And you'll also see that there's filters that you can use if you're just interested in a specific type of activity. So if you just want to review, activate that, and then you'll only see things that need reviewing. These within a campaign, you'll see different what we call projects, which are sort of the big buckets of materials within that campaign. Sometimes these are thematic, sometimes they're chronological. But if you dig into that, then you'll see more items, each of which has many pages. So I'm going to filter right now just to things that haven't been started. And you can see how that changes what I'm seeing. This one looks interesting, so I'll dig deeper, and then I'll see just the pages that are available, and I get finally to our transcription interface. I can tell that this is a not started page based on the status here at the top, if I was unsure. And before I get started, if I want to familiarize myself with our rules, I can get that how-to guide open. So as Abby is pointing out, this is available on every page. We have just the basic rules to get you started, but we also have really, really detailed rules for the many different edge cases and questions that might come up across the many different collections that we have. So please read through these. We also have review instructions, specific instructions for sheet music and for pages that are not in English, if you come across those, and things to help you transcribe there. We also have something called campaign tips. This should open anytime you come into a new campaign for the first time, but you can also open it yourself. And this will have just sort of a quick overview as well as some extra tips that might be useful within this specific collection. So for example, this has some language symbols because this is about a collection with a lot of Indigenous language documentation in it. So those are good to look through too, the first couple times you come into a campaign. We have filters in the viewer that are really useful. So those can help you adjust the page if it's a little dark, if it's a little light. Please try out the filters. Those can be really useful. You can also rotate a page if it's written sideways and you need to get to that text. So if I want to get started here, let's see. I'm not going to do this whole page, but I can zoom in and see that first line. I believe these first words are almighty arm. So I'm going to type those in, and you can see that it just, is a plain text box where I can type the words. I can save as I go. Once I've saved, I can feel free to leave this page. Maybe I decide that this is actually a little difficult for me, or I'm not actually interested in this page. I can save what I've done so far, and somebody else can come along and finish this page. If I transcribe the entire page and think that I've captured it all and it's all accurate and ready for somebody to look at it, I can submit for review. Again, I think I'm just going to do those first two pages. Maybe I want to find a different page. There's this nice, handy find a new page at the top that I really like to employ freely. And that'll take you directly to the next page available, which might be more up your alley. Another thing I want to point out is this contact us button that is on every page, that every transcription interface. You can also find it in the footer if you're not on a transcription page. That takes you to an email form where you can ask questions about a specific page. You can tell us if something is going wrong on the site or if you have questions about a collection. This is, I know it looks like your standard contact form, and sometimes you fill those out and you're not sure where they're going. This goes directly to us, the three people on this webinar. It is answered by real people. We check this every workday. So please let us know after this if you have questions by using this form or at any time in the future. There's also a helpful FAQ, frequently asked questions, that you can access within this interface too. We had mentioned that you can also get to how-to pages separately using the navigation at the top. These can be really useful if you want to read, outside of the transcription interface through the instructions. They're also a little bit more printable here. You can just right-click if you want to print them out for yourself. The resources page that we referenced is available via this top navigation. And it has information about documenting your service. It has all of those transcribe-a-thon resources that we talked about and some other things that you could find useful. The Discuss tab is not currently active, but that previously went to a discussion forum that was sunset in February, but we are working on a replacement. So stay tuned for that. Again, if you sign up for the newsletter, that's the best way to find out when we launch a new discussion forum. And then I finally want to show the profile page. So ignore the fact that this is a ridiculous amount of contributions. That's because I'm an administrator and everything I do counts as a contribution. But as you can see, this counts both the pages I've worked on, the campaigns, the actions. It lists all the campaigns I've worked on and what I've done. This is where you can find that service letter and the time log that we talked about. You can also find pages that you recently worked on, which can be really useful. You know, if I did something yesterday that I want to go back to, I could find it here. Again, these are only available if you do register for an account, which we highly encourage for that reason. One last thing I want to show is our About page. We, not too long ago, added this nice dashboard that shows what volunteers have accomplished together over the life of the program. And this is a really nice way to see not just that you're not just working by yourself, right? You're working together as a community to review and complete pages. This shows all the transcriptions and reviews that are happening every day. I think sometimes because this is an online activity, volunteers can feel a little bit like they don't know if there's anybody else here, if there's anybody else working, if it's just them by themselves. It's not. You're part of a community. So this is one way that you can see the impact that you're having across our collections. So I think I will pause my demo there, and we can switch to Q&A. And I have a feeling we may end up coming back to this interface as questions come in. But let me share my screen once again and pull up our links to our newsletter. This is where you can sign up for that newsletter we've talked about several times. Anytime we launch a new campaign, that information will be there. We share also about transcriptions getting published back into collections when things complete, special events we're doing like this one. And in addition to using that email form, you can also reach us by emailing this email address, crowd@loc.gov. So we really hope that you stay in touch beyond this webinar. So with that, we have plenty of time for questions, and I'm sure that you have plenty of them. So let's switch over to that.
Excellent. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. My VPN dropped. All right. So, yeah, Lauren, I have a feeling that we're going to be looking back at crowd. So get ready. Okay, first question. Do we receive any certificates at the end for this? Lauren, I'm wondering if you want to show off the profile page and the documentation we offer.
Yes, we don't have certificates, but the profile page letter is a good place to go for that. I am not going to try to download it right now because, as noted, my contributions attached to my administrator account are way too many, and it essentially will cause the download to malfunction. You should not have that problem. But you can download this at any time. You don't have to wait until you've reached a certain milestone or have done a certain amount. As soon as you register, this letter will be available to you. We'll say the date you registered, and it updates nightly. So, you know, each day it should have an accurate count of how much you've done, and you should be able to download that at any time. If you ever have issues with it, again, reach out to us.
Thanks, Lauren. And we've got a question about how to reorient how the transcription box and the item itself get displayed on a page. And I'm just wondering if we can open up the transcription and just show off how to click that split feature.
Right. So that's something I didn't show. So these two buttons here will change whether the transcription box appears side by side with the image or underneath it. So right now we're in this mode where it's the two parallel lines. So there's the image viewer and the transcription box. If we switch to the lines that look like this on top of each other, you will see that it switches the viewer and the transcription box. So that can be useful. We've heard from the reason we developed this was actually due to requests from volunteers to be able to sort of be able to go line by line with the image on top of the text for reviewing. So it can be super useful for that.
Excellent. Thanks, Lauren. So we have another question. Actually, we have like 25 questions, so let's keep going. How do I find special characters used in some documents? Lauren, do you want to show us that page in our resources?
So we do have, in the how-to guide, we do have from our most frequent non-English languages, we do have characters there. that you can essentially copy and paste as they come up. Um, you may also, there's also a link here that has a direct link to a web page that has way more language characters and alt codes. That's just for language characters, but sometimes other characters do come up that people want try to replicate, like copyright signs and others. We don't have direct resources about that in the site, but those are usually relatively easy to Google if you are trying to replicate a symbol. We do warn volunteers against, we really aren't trying to replicate formatting. Um, so, if there's lots of different ways that people write, sort of an and symbol, you'd just use an ampersand for any of those, for example. So don't get too caught up in trying to replicate symbols in most cases. But if you have specific questions about specific symbols, that's a great thing to email us about.
Excellent. All right, Lauren, I'm going to have one more for you, and then I'll pop over to Abby to give you a break. So Lauren, while you're on this page, could you just talk to us a little bit about how that transcribe with OCR button works? One, and then two, what is OCR?
Yes. So what is OCR? That's a great question. We have a little guide here specifically to answer that. But I'll quickly just say that OCR stands for optical character recognition. So it's technology that's existed for quite a long time now that is able to look at printed text and essentially match patterns of what it sees within an image to letters so that it can generate automated text from a printed page. So we have this transcribe with OCR button. I'm not going to go through the entire workflow since there's text in progress here, but if you click that button, it'll tell you that clicking transcribe with OCR will remove all existing transcription text and replace it. Once you're okay with that, you can click yes, and then you'll select the language. It'll be English in most cases, but we do have the option to, use it on any other language that you may come across. And then you'll click replace text, and it'll automatically generate text into the text box. Actually, I think I will do this because I can always undo. And this will show you that in this case, I'm not sure how good it will be. Yeah, you can already see that in particular, because this is very thin paper with a lot of bleed through, it's not great. It has some gibberish here at the top. Even this first line of text where here in the image it says he was grand, you can see that it substitutes an E for that G. So a lot of the materials that are printed that we've brought into By the People are in By the People because the OCR isn't great. That said, you will occasionally come across a page where it can be super helpful, and we encourage you to try it out. And we have a handy undo button. If it's not great, you can just wipe it back out and then start typing.
Awesome, Lauren, thank you. All right, Abby, I got one for you. And I'm going to combine a couple questions. So we've got folks wondering about what do you do if you see a word that's misspelled? And then if you're trying to decipher a word and you're not quite sure what it is, how would you do a little bit of research to figure out a correct spelling? Or where can you learn a little bit more about how to transcribe cursive handwriting?
Yeah, those are great questions. So we want you to stick to the original as much as possible. So when you see what you might consider misspellings in a document, we want you to transcribe those exactly as they are. Now, sometimes volunteers will use the tag feature, which is down at the bottom of the page. You can add tags to documents to add maybe the corrected spelling of what seems to be an important word, like a proper name or a place name or something like that. But it is important that you transcribe the text as you see instead of trying to correct misspellings, or another case where you might see this is abbreviations. So if you see a word abbreviated in the original text, maintain that abbreviation instead of expanding it. If you come to a word where you really can't tell what it is, we ask volunteers to represent those words, illegible words, as a question mark in brackets. Now, sometimes, especially with things like signatures or proper names, which are very important for accessibility and keyword searching, they can be hard to make out. And we actually have, I think in some of our that campaigns tip feature that Lauren showed, for some of our campaigns that are largely letters or correspondence, we've provided some tips that we've collected along the way for how to find or maybe try to do a little research to find out what those names can be. Some of those things include like looking at the letterhead. So if the letter has a printed letterhead, it's not uncommon that the person writing the letter is someone included in that letterhead. So sometimes that can help. Flashing a page back or a page forward can help. Maybe another transcriber has identified the name of that person, and it's like a series of letters from that same person. Looking at the name of the item or the folder that that particular page is in can be helpful. Sometimes these collections were organized by correspondent, which means that all of the letters that this person received, that that Walt Whitman received from Emerson, are all in one folder. So that by and large, anytime you see a name there, it's going to be Emerson. We've also had people tell us that they take, whatever details they can find or understand in that letter, and then they just search on the web and see what they might come up with. You'd be amazed at how many times you can find something referenced somewhere else that might help you, get to what you're looking for on the page.
Excellent. Thanks, Abby. And you talked a little bit about tags, and that kind of references another question we had. What happens to tags, and where do they end up?
Yeah, so tags, they're right under the transcription box there. So tags are really for volunteers to see when they're on a page. So sometimes people will come to a page and they'll see that it's in a certain language, and they'll mark it as such. And so people can find a language that way. There's no way to search in our site for the tags, unfortunately, so they're just sort of there at the page level. But then when transcriptions are completed, those tags become part of our data sets. So they don't make it back to the page level view on the Library of Congress's main website. But when we bundle all of the completed transcriptions for a collection together in one large file and make that available, then those tags are available there.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so and then we have some admin questions that I can just knock out. Someone's asking about, is this wonderful PowerPoint going to be available to view later? We are happy to. We're also going to be sharing the recording that we've got going right now. So if you're registered, keep an eye out for that. We will share the recording as soon as we can, and we'll share out this PowerPoint presentation as soon as we can too. And I have a feeling we're not going to get to all the Q&A, and so we will try to address any missed questions there as well. Okay, so let's keep rolling. So, Lauren, while you've got a page up, maybe this is a question for you. How do you handle spacing in a document? If you find some funny formatting, what are you supposed to do just generally? Do you always want to align one direction or not?
So we don't want you to spend time or energy with formatting and spacing. So for example, with this page, I can see that the text is indented at the start of a paragraph. We don't really want you to bother with indent. We do want you to use line breaks just to help with readability. So in this case, I would probably just, preserve the line breaks as they're shown here between paragraphs, start a new line. Sometimes we will have a case where there is text on two different pages in the same image, often then including a couple lines between the pages as a way to make it easier for your reviewers who are coming after you to read and understand what they're looking at. So don't, especially sometimes we have lists of things where people will spend a lot of time trying to space out the list. What we're really interested in is the text and the content. So use formatting to make the text readable by the reviewer coming after you, but don't try to, get your date to align over to the left, for example, or to the right, for example. Just type it sort of line by line, in an order that makes sense. Generally the order in which you would read it, right? If you're looking at a letter where there's a lot of sort of, a date over here and then an address over here and then maybe something else over on the other side, just don't worry about aligning them to the right or the left. Just keep it all on the left, but space in between them to try to make them readable.
And we have some questions about columns too, and that advice applies to columns. Please transcribe each column one after another. Don't try to replicate what you see in the page. The ingest in the loc.gov gets really broken and wonky. So we had a couple questions about columns, so those are done. All right. We also have a few questions in here about if you're new to By the People, and we have these new America at 250 campaigns coming out. Do you want volunteers to be working on just the semi-sesquicentennial campaigns right now, or is the whole site open?
The site is open. We like to say there are no assignments. We want you to follow your bliss. We want you to find what's interesting to you. That's the main point of this. As we were saying, it's important to get the materials transcribed. That's really important to future research use, but it's also about you exploring the library's collections. So, I think a lot of people are motivated by trying to help us finish campaigns, and that is really important. Sometimes those last couple hundred pages at the end can take a long time to get done because they often are the harder materials. So if that's something that motivates you, we need you. Please feel free to come in as our final reviewer. But follow what's interesting to you. The 250 materials are there, hopefully to draw your interest as you're hearing more about this anniversary in the news and thinking about what life might have been like way back then and how things are the same or are different. But if you're asking what we need most in general is reviewers. So once you try this out, once you get comfortable with transcription, please consider becoming a reviewer and consider looking for those campaigns that do have, review left to go, so that we can help get things closed off. We only bring materials back to our main website where they then become available for research use once sort of big sections of the campaign are done. So it is really important to sort of finish everything, because there are materials that sort of aren't yet available as those are waiting to be done. So that would be my advice. But yeah, follow your interests, see what sounds good to you. It's all there for the taking.
Excellent. All right, and we have a couple questions just about formatting. And instead of answering each of these individually, Lauren, I'm wondering if you can just share the transcription do's and don'ts links in the chat so people can reference them. That'll have answers to everybody's questions about strike-throughs, marginalia, more formatting. We have all of that documented in our site. So I would encourage folks, since we have so many questions today, to consult our transcription information that we've got here, how to transcribe. I promise you there are answers in there. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. We also have somebody wondering about how to get more experience at the Library of Congress. Maybe we can also share a link to the careers page from the library's website. All right, and we've got a question. Is there any additional training or proficiency tests required to become a registered transcriber? I can answer that. Everybody is welcome. There's no test. We think review is a great place to start if you're feeling like you want to figure out how to learn how the website works and to practice reading your cursive. But there are no other barriers to getting started if you just want to dive right into practice. Okay. Great questions, everyone. Do we have any live in-person events planned in the near future?
No, Live, well, we are typically at the National Book Festival, which happens every year in August. The date was just announced, so you can look that up on the library's website, and that is here in Washington, D.C. at the Convention Center. We usually have a table there, and we also give a presentation. So if you're in town for that event, we'd love to see you. But we host virtual volunteer office hours on a quarterly basis. So you can find out more information about those by subscribing to our newsletter. And we also occasionally host webinars like this, which again, you can find information by subscribing to our newsletter.
Thanks, Abby. We also have a question. Is the site always live? Are there hours that we restrict transcribing to? No, anytime works for us. However, we do observe standard business hours for replying to correspondence. Okay. Answered many of these. Can you transcribe on a tablet or does it have to be a laptop or desktop? I can answer this one too. We recommend using a keyboard and a standard PC setup. We have heard from volunteers that it's kind of hard to type and have the transcription interface up on like an iPad or something. But we've heard that that's actually a great way to review for some folks, just depending on what you're looking for. Okay.
And we have about 3 minutes left. So
Yes. Oh, yeah.
two more questions. But again, please email us.
And just to reiterate that we don't offer any certificates and we cannot sign off on hours, but we do offer plenty of documentation and service letters in your profile page that you can submit and certify for yourself. There's no formal process to become a reviewer. We just need you to register first. But again, there's no test that you have to take. Lauren, is there a minimum age for volunteering? Do college students and high school students use this at all?
Yes, we fall under the library standard participation and comment policy, which is 13 and up. However, that said, we've heard from intergenerational transcribing teams of kid and adult who have also worked together. But yes, we hear from a lot of high schoolers, a lot of kids who do this as part of their, service learning for National Honor Society or organizations like that. And definitely a lot of college students who do it similarly for service, but also in classes, in clubs. We have heard from transcribing clubs at a fair number of colleges around the country. So if you're interested in starting a club, please let us know. We love keeping track of how those are spreading around.
Yeah, so we like to share experiences on the Signal too, if anybody wants to read about how some universities and high schools use by the people in the classroom. We are not affiliated with the Smithsonian. Great question, though. We're in a different branch of the government, but they have their own transcription center. And if you enjoy transcribing with us, you will probably also enjoy transcribing with them. Someone's reporting that they often get a gateway error in the evening. We are aware that's just when traffic has been ticking up for a variety of reasons, but we do encourage you to just save continuously while you're transcribing to ensure that your hard work isn't lost. And there's one more clarifying question. I'm sorry, I do not know what a CE certificate is. So I don't think we can provide that. We don't provide any documentation. All right, Lauren, should we take one more or do you think we're at time? Oh, continuing education. No, I'm sorry, we can't sign off on any kind of formal forms for you all. And someone's just wondering where they can find that service letter again.
Oh, the service letter is available on your profile page. When you go to your profile, once you're a registered user, you'll see a list of your contributions. And underneath that is the service letter download. It is 4:00, so we're at time. Thank you all so much for coming, for your wonderful questions and your interest in becoming a volunteer. We hope that we will see you on the site soon and hear from you. And happy transcribing. As we said, please keep in touch. And with that, I hope you have a good evening and rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.